You would have the atheist person or the critic of Christianity trying to convince the Christian that these things are actually part of Christianity. We don't have the same case with Islam. With Islam, the Muslims themselves will be here arguing for slavery, sex slavery, child marriage, and so on. If you don't believe me, and you haven't seen many Muslim debates, there are many of these Muslim debates that you can directly find here on Modern Day Debate. We've had lots of them. I don't want to mention names now, but you can find them. You probably know what I'm talking about. So Muslims will lovingly argue for these things and will argue, for example, that a child is a relative, that pedophilia is a relative, that child marriage is a relative. You had, I'm going to mention him since he wasn't part of this anyway, Mohammed Hijab, for example, in a conversation quite recently arguing that that in Islam it's completely fine to marry underage girls and that there is no that pedophilia is a relative, that if you see, I'm sorry, it's going to be very disgusting, but we're talking about Islam, so I can't really help it. He said that if you see a little girl who has large hips, then of course things might get different and so on. These are things that one of the most popular Muslim apologists and Muslim YouTubers has said in public. Still, we are sitting here arguing about whether Islam is good or bad, whether Islam is worse than Christianity or not. I have yet to find popular Christians making such suggestions for us. Before anything, I want to point out that at this moment, as we speak, there are still dozens of hostages kept by the Islamic terrorist organization Hamas and the Islamic terrorist organization Palestinian Islamic Jihad, among others, who massacred people and also took many hostages on October 7. And I hope for the timely release of the remaining hostages, for which I'm also wearing this. Yeah, with that said, it's very difficult to tell which religion is worse for society, Islam or Christianity, as you can see. This is a very difficult topic. I'm going to try to make it very easy as it gets. So there's, of course, a very big irony here, which is that today I was actually supposed to have this debate with a Muslim debater by the name of Comedy Central Dawa. And Comedy Central Dawa threatened me halfway through the debate, through the last debate, the first debate, and also made this this sign here and said that he would be here to kill me, so take me out for coffee. That's what he said. After that, he had to be dropped. We had to look for a different Muslim debater instead, but there was no Muslim debater who would actually come up and peacefully have a debate, which is why we eventually had to settle for my friend Gnostic Informant here to jump in and to defend the position of Islam instead. So this is, of course, very, very, very telling. At this point, it is still very difficult for us to tell whether Islam or Christianity is worse for society. On the other hand, I have to point out that I'm actually happy that Gnostic Informant is here instead of a Muslim opponent, because if a Muslim opponent was here, we would find in no time ourselves discussing about why it's okay to have sexual intercourse with children. So I'm very glad that we're not doing that here. All right, so let's talk about it. Which one is worse for society? Is it Islam or is it Christianity? With Islam, we have several problems to deal with. I already mentioned one: child marriage, wife beating, the subjugation of women. We have slavery, sex slavery, killing apostates, killing blasphemers. One of the main reasons why we're having this debate today, which with my opponent, Gnostic Informant, is that the other opponent said that I, as an apostate of Islam, deserve to be executed. He declared that my blood is 100% halal, which in Islamic lingo means that I may be executed or killed at will. We have just witnessed in Sweden a few weeks ago, where a friend, Salwan Momika, who was a very brave person and a hero, who would go out and make a case by burning the Quran in order to show that a human may do that and should not be killed over pieces of paper. He was brutally murdered and shot in his home. The same people who shot him Muslims around the world, I have to say this is just the truth. To this day, I have still only seen one Muslim person who actually responded to this with disgust and condemnation. The majority have been celebrating and have been justifying it. Some said, yeah, we shouldn't be killing, but whatever. He basically asked for it and so on. So with Islam, we are dealing with some really, really, really destructive elements, destructive impacts on society, things that we should not be dealing with. We do not have the same thing with Christianity. We just don't. The worst thing that you could say, with everything that I just mentioned, is that somebody who is an opponent of Christianity could argue, well, you know, you could find some of these things in the Bible. You can find something in, I don't know, in Deuteronomy, in Leviticus, here and there. And then you would have the atheist person or the critic of Christianity trying to convince the Christian that these things are actually part of Christianity. We don't have the same case with Islam. With Islam, the Muslims themselves will be here arguing for slavery, sex slavery, child marriage, and so on. If you don't believe me, and you haven't seen many Muslim debates, there are many of these Muslim debates that you can directly find here on Modern Day Debate. We've had lots of them. I don't want to mention names now, but you can find them. You probably know what I'm talking about. So Muslims will lovingly argue for these things and will argue, for example, that a child is relative, that pedophilia is relative, that child marriage is relative. You had, I'm going to mention him since he wasn't part of this anyway, Mohammed Hijab, for example, in a conversation quite recently arguing that in Islam it's completely fine to marry underage girls and that there is no that pedophilia is relative, that if you see, I'm sorry, it's going to be very disgusting, but we're talking about Islam, so I can't really help it. He said that if you see a little girl who has large hips, then of course things might get different and so on. These are things that one of the most popular Muslim apologists and Muslim YouTubers has said in public. Still, we are sitting here arguing about whether Islam is good or bad, whether Islam is worse than Christianity or not. I have yet to find popular Christians making such suggestions for us. It's just really, really bad. I can predict the angle that my opponent, who is arguing for a very bad and lost case, I can predict the angle that he is going to come at. The angle is going to be that Islam in the past made some contributions to society, such as scientific contributions, which is complete nonsense, and also that Christianity also in the past at some point was bad. Like a million years ago it was also bad, you know. A million years ago Christians also did some bad things. So let's talk about it. I want to go about this from three different perspectives. I want to talk about the science perspective and the history of Islam versus the history of Christianity. I want to talk about war in Islam and war in Christianity and Muslim societies and Christian societies in today's time. Now, Islam emerged from a very savage, underdeveloped region in 7th century Arabia. An environment where people didn't have any idea what's going on out there in the world. While neighboring cultures had scientific advancements and had an idea of what the world looks like, what the natural world looks like, the Arab society was very, very backward and actually had beliefs such as that the earth is this thing that is carried on the back of a whale. I'm serious, this is a 7th century Arab polytheistic belief, which other populations at the same time did not have. They considered it ridiculous. Islam came as a violent culture from that region, and in a vacuum where the Eastern Roman Empire and the Persian Empire were weak and were beaten, Islam expanded violently into these lands and took over scientific advancements that were already available in these places that Islam conquered. Those scientific advancements were taken over by Muslims, and Muslims then used them in order to further understand the world around them and to further their Islamic beliefs. We have Toby Ehoff in his research, The Rise of Early Modern Science. He will, for example, demonstrate that that Muslims only used Islam insofar that it benefited, or used science insofar that it benefited Islam, and as soon as it wasn't useful for Islam anymore, they basically dropped it and moved on. Which is why, and don't you find it kind of funny? We always hear about Islam's contributions to science. When in the hell was that? That was 800 years ago. 700, 800 years ago. We are sitting here after 800 years and saying, oh, Islam also made some contribution. Well, when? 800 years ago. Fantastic, great. Awesome, thank you. I would suggest Robert G. Hoyland's book, In God's Path, to further understand how Islam developed as a tribal conquering force into these territories and then just took over after pillaging societies and then began enforcing their Islamic beliefs upon people in order to first use non-Muslims as a source of income and then strengthen the collective body of Islam. The scientific revolution came about at some point in the Western world. First the Renaissance, then the scientific revolution. There's something very, very interesting about the scientific revolution, which is that the scientific revolution as we know it was led almost exclusively by well-known Christian people. The leaders of the scientific revolution were almost all Christians. There's only one prominent name that was not really a Christian, and that was Baruch Spinoza, for example. He was not a Christian. He was kind of he had pantheistic ideas. The scientific revolution was led by Christian motivations to further understand the world and so on. The Enlightenment later on was less Christian, but the scientific revolution and other revolutions in the West that led to skyrocketing Christian society and putting it way ahead of Islamic society, which was left far in the back, were led by Christian people and Christian sentiments. So if we want to say that Islam contributed to science at some point, then we should apply the same standard to the scientific revolution and also say that Christians or Christianity contributed to science, and it actually happened quite recently and also in a much more effective and much better way. We also have today's time, of course. In today's time, the leading scientific contributors by country in the world, the leading countries that present scientific innovations nowadays are found in the West, in the Far East, and also in that one Jewish country that all Muslim countries are so obsessed with, Israel. Moving on from that, let's come to war. Let's come to how Islam handled war. I just want to mention one thing, which I always love to cite. And I would like everyone to just make a note of this if you want to look at what Islam itself says about Islam's expansionism. The book Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun was a forerunner of sociology, forerunner of modern history. He was a historian, a Muslim, a scholar. What he said in his book Muqaddimah is that Islam is different from the other religions such as Christianity and Judaism because in the Muslim community the holy war is a religious duty because of the universalism of the Muslim mission and the obligation to convert everybody to Islam either by persuasion or by force. Therefore, caliphate and royal authority are united in Islam so that the person in charge can devote the available strength to both of them at the same time. He continues, the other religious groups did not have a universal mission, and the holy war was not a religious duty to them, save only for purposes of defense. It's very funny. This is not me saying it. This is not a Christian saying it. This is an Islamic, a Muslim scholar saying it, who is also very, very well respected in sociology. Let's talk about the beginnings of Christianity and the beginnings of Islam. Christianity started out as a religion that spread through missionary activities. Mostly in the beginnings, in the first centuries, it spread by people going around and preaching Christianity to others. Islam didn't quite start in the same way. Islam started by conquest. The first centuries make up for most of the Islamic spread, and that Islamic spread was done by conquest, by severe, significant bloodshed. I would once again recommend Robert G. Hoyland's book, In God's Path, who beautifully breaks it down and points out that Islam was, in its beginnings, all about conquering and pillaging. That's what it was all about. That's what Muhammad's message was. Muhammad said, according to the authentic Islamic narratives, that he has been sent to fight the people until they testify that there is no God but Allah and that he is the messenger of Allah. Only then would people be given the chance to live as equals to Muslims. Otherwise, there is always a universal mission to fight them. The same thing was never the case in Christianity. In Christianity, among Christians did adopt ways of fighting and expanding, colonialism, On occasion, there were forced conversions. There were certain parts of the Crusades, especially in Northern Europe, which involved forcibly converting people. However, these are initiatives taken by Christians themselves. These do not go back to the fundamentals of the religion itself. In Islam, it's quite different. We have Quran chapter 9, verse 29, which clearly says that Muslims are to fight those who do not believe in Islam, or who do not believe in Allah and His Messenger, and who do not convert to Islam until they submit and pay protection money. So Islam is basically, in a way, some kind of mafia, which goes around and says, either you become part of us, or you will pay protection money. If you don't, then we will kill you. Or like the Muslim scholar Asim al-Hakim said, we give you two good options. With Christians, it's very, very interesting that in the beginnings, the Romans actually despised the Christians as a pacifistic cult. It's very, very interesting. The Romans specifically despised the Christians as a pacifistic cult who are pathetic people who don't want to fight. And I'm usually not here just defending Christianity, but this is just what the conversation has come to, I don't know. With Islam, the reputation is always quite different, that Muslims are these warriors who are proud to fight and proud to kill and proud to subjugate, proud to humiliate, proud to make everyone scared. But how dare we be Islamophobic? So, I would also add here Davis Brown's paper, The Influence of Religion on Interstate Armed Conflict. He points out that when armed conflict and religion are considered, Christianity is negatively associated with more armed conflict, whereas Islam is usually positively associated with armed conflict. So where Islam is present, you are much more likely to have armed conflicts, which is why in today's time, the majority of terrorism-related deaths take place in the Muslim world, led by Muslim terrorists. Oh, sorry, I mean Islamic terrorists. Sorry, I mean Islamist terrorists. Don't want to be Islamophobic here. Let's come back to today's time. In today's time, the Muslim majority societies remain oppressive. We wouldn't be having this conversation, we couldn't be able to have this conversation that we are having here in a Muslim country. And by a Muslim country, I'm not just referring to a country ruled by Islamic law, I'm referring to countries where Muslims are dominant in society. We can have this conversation in predominantly Christian societies. We are in one right now. The United States of America is a predominantly Christian country. It's not a predominantly atheist country. Atheists are not in charge. Most people here still believe in Christianity. And in this country, we are able to say whatever the hell we want about Christianity, for example, or about Jesus, or about Mother Mary, or whatever it is, about the Bible. Nobody cares. Nobody comes to kill you. The same thing is not the case in the Muslim world. In the Muslim world, if we go to some of the most secular Muslim countries, like Turkey, I myself currently have arrest warrants out against me in Turkey because I said, for example, that, that the Quran is a stupid book, that Muhammad was a liar, that the Quran is a book of ignorance. These are things for which I have arrest warrants out against me. So we don't necessarily have to go to a society where Islam rules. We can just go to a society where Muslims are the majority and compare that then to a society where Christians are the majority. The contrast is quite clear. It's extremely difficult and rather absurd to make the case that Christianity is worse for society than Islam is. Islam brings oppression, persecution, a lack of religious freedom. Unfortunately, we are also importing this right now into the Western world because in the West, people have this whole tendency of being kind of suicidal when they are too comfortable, I guess. I don't know. And we also have examples, by the way. If we go to Britain, we can see that in Britain, the majority of Muslims, when asked whether those who draw Muhammad cartoons should be punished or not, we will see that most Muslims will say that they should be punished. Most Muslims will say that 0% of British Muslims, when asked, said that homosexuality is acceptable. 0%.
30 seconds left.
0%. Speaking of Muhammad cartoons, I mean, if we had an event here announced as a Muhammad cartoon event, we would probably immediately have people attacking us. We also have a security detail here in force, which is because of Islam. Tells us a lot. So if you want to make the case that Christianity is worse for society, I would say, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Stay away from Islam.
Bye.